18 of the last 20 years, she and her lovely family have lived and loved in Saudi Arabia, and you'll hear a little bit about that in her message. Doreen's first coaching assignment was in 1981, and she has been serving in this way ever since. Her joy is to witness life transformation and expansion in the lives of her clients as they manage change. We are delighted to have her here because she is going to just in this message this morning allow us the opportunity to open more and to take that out into the world and stop like just keeping it for our peeps, but being that light everywhere. So give a big CSL warm welcome to Doreen Comerford.
Good morning, Dallas.
Good morning.
Who would have imagined that back in the 60s, when I was watching the TV back in Glasgow, that one day I would be in Dallas, the home of JR. It's amazing. There was a man, and he needed a job. And so he looked on Craigslist. And on Craigslist, he found a job for $1,000 a week. So he wasn't very sure about this job, so he called on it. And they said, well, there's only one very, very different condition. You cannot tell anyone that you are applying for this job. You cannot speak about it to anyone during the time you are on this job. And you may never tell anyone afterwards. And he thought, very interesting. But he said, I'll go for it anyway. So he went for the interview. And the initial interview was at the zoo. Can you believe the zoo? And at the zoo, they said, guess what? We have a problem. The gorilla has escaped. The gorilla is running amok in the city, and we do not want to create a huge panic. So your job is to be the gorilla. Okay. All right. So for 30 days, he went into training to be the gorilla. He learned how to beat his chest. He learned how to swing. He learned how to make all the gorilla noises. He learned how to eat a banana all at once. All these skills that gorillas have. And he learned them all in a month. And so he went into the gorilla enclosure and he became a gorilla. The zoo was full of children and laughing parents, and they fell in love with his gorilla self. And so one day, as he was in his enclosure, he got a little bit overexcited in his swinging, and he went, whoops, over into the lion's den. Oh, and he went, oh my gosh, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And he's standing there quaking as the lion comes up to him. His mane stands straight out, and he roars, and he roars, and he makes a lot of noise. And then he gets down and he says, would you shut up? You'll get us both fired. So the reason I tell you that story is, are we sometimes like that at work? I mean, do we really show up in our powerful, authentic selves, and then all of a sudden one day drop into the lion's den and go, and then find that we're not showing up as the spiritual beings that we truly are? Tell me I'm not alone. That happens, right? So today we're going to talk about 4 strategies that will support you in being in the lion's den, in being out in the community at work, in being in your business and being wholly present as an entrepreneur, whatever your particular expression is in this world. We're going to talk this morning about 4 points. Thinking in a certain way, acting in a certain way, living in gratitude, and being a person of increase. And I'm teaching from a book that I understand is available here in your bookstore if you'd like to explore this some more. It's a wonderful book called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. And it ties in beautifully with exactly what you're studying this month with the corporate Sufi. So let me ask you something. Money doesn't grow on trees. Time waits for no one. The early bird gets the worm. How come you all know the same answers I do? Were you there at 16 Carmont Drive, Shawlands, Glasgow, when I was growing up? Yeah? Oh, hi, brother! My long-lost brother. You know, our minds are full, and they're filled with ideas, old sayings, strategies, paradigms that no longer serve us sometimes. And when we're out in the world, they occasionally will creep into the conversation, or they'll show up, or they'll just kind of explode. So one of the things that happens is in our over-programming, in our paradigm, is we don't always think in a certain way. And Wallace says there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. A thought in the substance produces the image, the thing that is imaged by the thought. Now here in this fabulous Center for Spiritual Living, you're so blessed to have this teaching. And this teaching teaches a way to pray, a scientific way to pray. It's all mathematically certain that 1 and 1 is 2. And that's one of the reasons we teach this sort of prayer. So thinking in a certain way is thinking in a particular way. It's thinking at the vibration of what we want to bring into our lives. It's thinking about what would you love? What would you truly love to have happen? What resonates with your unique spirit, your unique soul? What are you calling in that you can just revel in and say, oh, thank you, God. This is exactly the way I want my life to be. Not only is it thinking in a certain way about a certain experience in either health, wealth, purpose, or love, but it's also thinking in a certain way, as in a definite way. Because when we think in a definite way and we pour that definiteness into our prayers and our spirit, then what happens is we raise ourselves to the next vibration of whatever is calling us in. And we experience a life that is fuller and freer and is an expression of the truly divine self that we are incarnated on earth to be. So we think in a certain way. The second part is acting in a certain way. And I'd like to talk about acting in a certain way. I'm sure you've all heard of Edison. Edison has a piece of writing that's actually in the Smithsonian Institute, and it says, I will deliver to the world a system of illumination. For 60,000 years, we were using candles and wicks and oil lamps and all sorts of things. And this man arrives on earth, and he said, I will deliver. He made a decision. He acted in a certain way. How many times? Hundreds, 1,000 times he tried things. And each time it was a failure, he went back to the same action. Let's do it again. And then, oh, that didn't work, so let's do it again. So it's an it, not it process. And as we expand and become fuller beings of expression, we learn that process of it, not it, because we're guided by our heart and our spiritual divine self. Wallace says about this, you cannot act where you are not, which means you've got to be right here present. Everyone take a deep breath. Now we're all present. We can only act with this breath and in this moment. He also says you cannot act where you have been. So we can't act yesterday, and we can't act tomorrow. We have to take action today. And he says you are only to be where you are, be fully present. So part of that is acting in the face of our old paradigms, in the face of these old ideas, in the face of things that got planted in us as unwilling seeds that have grown in our lives. So one of the things I'd recommend that you might consider is coming to the workshop this afternoon. That would be acting in a certain way, is showing up. And when you come to the workshop, my promise is to deliver an opportunity for you to look at building a blueprint. You will leave with a blueprint of your life: health, wealth, relationships, and purpose. So back to Wallace. Another element when we go out in the world and we operate in our businesses and we serve our clients and you show up with your coworkers, bosses, people that surround you in your daily life, it's important to be grateful. I'll share a little bit about my experience of gratitude, which I really got very deeply when I lived in Saudi Arabia. We had men came on the compound every morning. Most of these men were from Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, a few Filipinos. Most of those men could speak a bit. They could speak their own language, and they could speak some Arabic and some English. They spoke 3 languages. They were paid approximately $2 a day. They were out in the heat from 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. They were mostly our gardeners. They climbed the trees, and they cut all the palm trees, made them beautiful. And I learned how blessed and how amazing my life was when I experienced that contrast of living over there. Often they would come to the door with an empty plastic bottle and say, "Water, ma'am." All they wanted was water because there was no drinking water outside, and they were out in the heat all day. So for me, when I need a wake-up call, and occasionally, who needs a wake-up call occasionally? As to how fortunate we are and how much freedom we have. We have circumstances out there that reflect back saying, no, we're not free. No, you're not economic. That's not true. We are free, but we tend to work with our old paradigms and we work with our senses, what our 5 senses are. When we were little, we were taught that we had 5 senses. But how many of us were taught that we have 6 mental faculties? How many of us were taught to use our imagination, to get our heart and our head connected by pulling forth what we would love and then imagining it and placing that image inside our prayer and living the prayer? So Wallace says, faith is born of gratitude. The grateful mind continually creates good. Good things and expectation becomes faith. Every outgoing wave of grateful thanksgiving produces faith. And it's really lovely to have faith, to have that continuity of knowing that life is always progressing through us. That as you're out in the world in your job, serving your clients, supporting people, helping people, that you are the divine presence that you came here to express. The final piece is being a person of increase. Wallace Wattles likes to talk about being a person of increase. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about being a person of increase. There was a fisherman, and he was out on the river, young fellow in his teens, and he saw this elderly, very experienced fisherman just across the bank from him, and he thought, what's he doing? Because he noticed he was catching a lot of fish, but he was throwing many of them back. He'd catch a fish, and he'd throw it back. He'd catch a fish, and he'd throw it back. And he couldn't understand why the elderly gentleman was doing that. So he walked over, and he timidly said, "Excuse me, sir, but is there an ordinance? Are we only supposed to catch a certain size fish? Is there a problem? Are they bony?" He was thinking, you know, are they not good if they're a certain size? And the elderly gentleman says, no, not at all. He said, you see this ruler? This wee ruler, is the same size as my frying pan. And that's the only size of fish I can catch, because if I catch one that's bigger than this, it's got to go back in the burn, it's got to go back in the river. Now, how often do you do that? An idea lands and you go, oh, well, I could do that. I could, you know, but instead of reeling that idea in, we throw it out. We just toss it and we go, oh. So the fisherman was actually functioning because this was the size of his frying pan. And circumstances, experiences, life, the media, all these things outside that we see with our five senses, we tend to believe them a bit more than we believe the innate mental faculties that we were born with. One of the courses that I teach is a 6-week course on just using your mental faculties. It's called Into Your Genius, and we've talked this morning about brilliance and being brilliant. And each of you has an absolute innate and natural brilliance within you. And so the secret is how to nurture that brilliance and give it a bigger frying pan and expand from being a wee frying pan to a bigger frying pan and maybe a larger frying pan. Because as we live a fuller, freer, more expanded life, that's what happens. Life gets better. It gets freer. It gets fuller. You go off and you have adventures. You go to Saudi Arabia for 15 years and learn a few lessons. But nevertheless, it's a bigger frying pan. That's all it is. So it's important when you're in the moment thinking about being the person of increase. The person with the bigger frying pan looks like someone has possibly an even better idea in the moment, or a higher vibration of thinking, or is truly kind and generous to the next person. If you're sitting on an airline, you may just beam light and love to your other travelers on that airline. It can be silent, or it can be an action that you can take. So being that person of increase is filling the space up. It is emanating at your greater sense of being, coming from, who am I? This is what I love. This is my experience of life, and let me share it. So some of you at work may be in struggle. You may be resonating at a frequency of unhappiness. You may be performing at lower than you know you really have been called here to perform at. You may feel a little bit underappreciated. Nevertheless, these 4 strategies, if you will take them and apply them, thinking in a certain way, thinking positively, thinking, and I don't mean positively at that very narrow band that we hear about positive thinking, like in magazines. You pick up any magazine nowadays and there's 9 mistakes that people make in thinking, or how to be more positive. I'm talking about coming from your internal being and the internal sense of who you truly are deep down. Wallace says, you are a creative center from which increase is given to all. And that creative center means that in your heart and mind, you have 6 mental faculties from which to think, from which to create and imagine, from which to focus and hold that focus. And when the mind goes back to 16 Carmet Drive or wherever you grew up, whenever the mind takes you back to, oh, well, I can't do that, or no, that doesn't feel right. Those are old paradigms, and they're not calling us forth to be who we truly are in the world. And each of you is here to be a force for divine good and a force for beauty and love. So I know that some of you have an idea in your mind that you have plans for this afternoon. How many of us walk through life like, I got my plan? Okay, I got my plan. Well, some of you may think you have plans to do something else, but really you're coming to my workshop, right? I would love to invite you into an experiment, to build a blueprint, to start to build a blueprint for your life, to start to build a sketch. You can't build a house just like that. We have to put the foundation down and then steadily create it. I would also like to offer you this, that when you become your own Chief Possibility Officer, I'd love to have one of these for each of you. But I would like to offer you and you and you and you and you and you and you, each one of you, possibility that as you walk out this door today, that you walk with certainty and power, that you think in a certain way, thinking in the direction of what would I love to have, and that you act in a certain way, so that you take the appropriate actions of, whoa, that's a great idea, I never thought about that. An action, remember, could be like the fish. Instead of throwing it away, actually do the action. Inspiration without action is merely entertainment. And also, as you leave today, I would like to invite you to be the person of gratitude. Not gratitude for something's coming to me. If I'm grateful, something is going to happen. But gratitude from the perspective of, I am so grateful, coming from the ground up, living in it, being it, feeling it. Experiencing it as kind of a visceral experience. And then also to be the person of increase wherever you are. To be a system of generosity, as the universe is a system of generosity for us. We're naturally generative beings. At this fabulous center, Reverend Petra and all the practitioners and her whole team are here to support you in generating what is truly your life. And so I'd like to invite you to, as you leave today, to think in a certain way, to act in a certain way, to be beings of gratitude, to be living as a person of increase, taking the best thought, taking the next best action, asking the question, and living in the land of questions. How can we ask a better question? And I would like to challenge you that you do exactly as it says on the front of the program. In the Corporate Sufi, he says, either I live a life that I really want to live, or I live a life that others want me to live. A life wherein I would not perform with joy and reach my full potential. So Rumi says, it's as if a king has sent you into a foreign land to perform one purpose. And if you didn't perform that one purpose, all life would have been a waste. So I invite you today to come to my workshop. That would be wonderful. But greater than that, I invite you to step into that land of possibility. Acting, thinking in a positive, certain way. Being that person of increase and living in gratitude. And my hat's off to you, each and every one of you, as you go out and you be your own Chief Possibility Officer. And as we quiet and move into the silence, I invite you to become quiet, to become aware of the power, the possibility, the potential, and to unite with the one life, the one love. the one source of our being. And that as we unite and become aware of the breath, aware of the deep knowledge and the presence, we become completely harnessed to that energy, to that source, to that divine spirit. And as we move into that, we become conscious of what is ours to do and whose we belong to and who we are becoming in the process. So I invite you into this space of knowing and recognition, and into this realization that each life here is perfectly expressing as a holistic, authentic, whole person and whole being, perfect in every moment, in every step, and in every circumstance, with every person at work, and at home, and at play. Knowing that each soul here is authentically being, that is authentically reverberating and vibrating exactly where they know to be. And that as each soul moves into a higher level of vibration, that we are all lifted up. Each of us is lifted up in the divine. We're illuminated in spirit, by spirit, and through spirit. And that experience is matched with a frequency, with a picture, and with an action. And that we leave here today knowing that this picture, this frequency, and this action is ours to be, do, and have. And so I settle into the grateful knowing that all is well, all is deeply, deeply well, and that this experience is perfect and is complete, no matter the circumstances, no matter the outside judgment. This experience is complete and whole, as it is, as it stands. And we release this moment, knowing that this moment is carrying us on the wave to the next breath, and that as we breathe into life, we let go and say, thank you, Father. And I invite you to join me and say, and so it is.